I want to welcome you. I'm Jessica Berman, Director of the Dusseau Center for the Humanities, and we're very pleased to be a co-sponsor for today's event, along with the Africana Studies Department, the History Department, the Albano Kuhn Library Gallery, the Libby Kuhn Endowment Fund, and the Friends of the Library and Gallery. This talk is part of the Humanities Forum, which I hope is familiar to all of you. And I want to encourage you to take a look at the other events in the series, either on the flyer that we have available or on the Drescher Center website. That's dreschercenter.umbc.edu. The next Humanities Forum event is coming up on Wednesday, March 4th. That's at 7 p.m. in the Performing Arts and Humanities Building, room 132. The title is "There's a Crack in Everything, That's How the Light Gets In." A talk by Michael Rakowitz, who's Professor of Art Theory and Practice at Northwestern University, and he will discuss his publicly engaged and often highly political art. His art ranges from a work called Parasite, in which the artist built inflatable shelters for homeless people, which were attached to the exterior vents of buildings, and their HVAC kind of inflated these sites. Parasites, to another work called Minaret, in which access is gained to rooftops in Western cities, and the Islamic call to prayer is sounded. I think it should be a really interesting and dynamic talk, and I want to invite you all to come back next Wednesday. Next, I'm going to turn the mic over to Tom Beck, who's the Chief Curator here in the Library Gallery, who will introduce our distinguished speaker.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jessica. It's a delight that we're able to have this event here as part of the Humanities Forum, and thank you to the Humanities Forum. We're delighted to present William Earle Williams speaking about his imagery and the exhibition, A Stirring Song SungHeroic. And I love the fact that this title is a little longer. It says, African Americans from Slavery to Freedom, 1619 to 1865. Photography by William Earle Williams. The show is organized and presented by Ms. Emily Haverford, Library Gallery Curator of Exhibitions. Let's give Emily a hand, please. She did a really good job. William Earle Williams is an accomplished artist, photographer, historian, curator, author, professor, gallery director, public speaker, and I'm sure many other descriptors as well. Most of all, he might be considered a poet, because his imagery is so highly poetic. What does it mean to describe photographs as poetic? Traditional definitions of poetry would include terms such as compositions in which the expression of feeling and ideas is given intensity by the use of distinctive style and rhythm, and the embodiment of thought or feeling in a poetic manner. These terms describe William Earle Williams's photographs, his current work particularly, because the compositions of the images are so absolutely artful and exciting and exacting that poet William Carlos Williams and photographer Walker Evans would have admired them. They also would have marveled by the way that the tonalities express Williams's feelings and ideas. The images truly are the embodiment of his thoughts expressed poetically. William Earle Williams is Audrey and John L. Dusseau Professor of Humanities, as well as Professor of Fine Arts and Curator of Photography at Haverford College. By the way, we here at UMBC know Haverford College, not only because it's such a distinguished institution. There have been many interactions over the years between Haverford and UMBC. Exhibitions have been hosted here and there, but also UMBC President Freeman Rabowski received an honorary doctorate from Haverford in 2007. Professor Williams received his MFA degree in photography from Yale University in the School of Art, and holds a BA in history, I should add, from Hamilton College. His photographs have been widely exhibited at diverse institutions, including the National Gallery of Art, the Smithsonian Institution, and UMBC, twice at UMBC, twice before that. His work is held in many public collections, including the National Gallery of Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Baldwin Museum of Art, and UMBC's special collections. He has received numerous fellowships from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and is awarded the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship for 2003-2004. If written poetry is made up of parts of speech, one might admire the nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, as well as the history found in the poetic tones of Professor Williams' imagery. I present to you William Earle Williams.
Wait a minute, I have to give you a handshake before you depart. See, Jessica, I would have done that for you too, but I was not coming after. And perhaps that is the right phrase, to come after. Tom's very fine introduction, which moves me very deeply because it was totally unexpected. And I'm not talking loud enough?
No.
Okay. How's this?
Yes.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Good. Because it was totally unexpected, and it's nice to be back at UMBC. It's quite an honor to be here, to have work on the gallery walls, and to have it so expertly presented. I think that is a hallmark of a first-rate institution that understands presentation and understands the seriousness of presenting work, creative work, in a way that it becomes open to an audience. So you are the audience today. I thank you all for coming out. I hope no one slipped or fell on their way coming down these hills. Who said Maryland was flat? It's just not true. And I also would like to, again, thank all of the institutions at the university which have participated and sponsored the activities that you all get to witness and be a part of, which is, I think, great for Baltimore County, metropolitan area, which includes Washington, D.C. So it's a huge area. So I hope you all are all from all around, and particularly I see some young faces out there. So I have to assume that you all are students here, which is great, because part of what I'm interested in is education, is teaching, and bringing out. That is, that when you come in contact with the work, then it brings something out of you, or you find something that you didn't know was in you that was there. And that's also part of the process that I've gone through. I'd like to think of it as been a metamorphosis, but probably not that intense or consequential. But it was an incremental set of coming to a state of consciousness about a particular set of historical occurrences that shaped so much of who we are today and probably what we're going to be tomorrow. Hence I added "and beyond," because it took 300 years or so to get to freedom. And what does freedom mean? And it's almost presumptuous of me to have 81 photographs and 51 artifacts and say that it covers the history of slavery, or it's the history of something. But that's one of the privileges of being an artist, is that you don't have to be totally mimetic about everything, which in a way you can't be. And so you're left with your tools and trying to figure out a way to present the facts as you understand them, and also your own imaginative journey. So it's really been more of a journey than a metamorphosis or any kind of consciousness in that way for me. And I hope for you, when you see the exhibition in its totality, which is the photographs and the historical objects and artifacts. And this is part of what I wanted to show you by way of showing you me, by way of showing you this photograph, which is not too far from here. But it's exactly the spot where the first people of African descent landed in the North American colonies. That spot, Jamestown Island, Jamestown Colony. It also happens that that particular spot where we're standing later became a Civil War fort that was built by enslaved people. One of the misconceptions of 1619, and that's the first recorded census of black people on Jamestown Island, is that all of those people were enslaved. Rather, they were indentured, which is a legalism, but it's a very important legalism. It took another 60 years for indenturitude, at least for black people, to become the codes of slavery and later the law of the land. And I understand part of your programming here is a celebration of the end of legal slavery. And that is a huge distinction from all the other terms that might be associated with it. And that's really what we've come to understand since 1865 is the baggage that goes with it. And for me, this is where it was. This is what I discovered in doing and searching for this place. And it just so happened when I was there that they discovered the actual fort at Jamestown, which many had thought had been lost, but it had been found, and it happened to be found, and I happened to talk to the archaeologists when that happened. And one other thing about this picture, it's not what it appears to be. Now, can you see my little arrow there? Okay, great. This looks like it's associated or attached to that tree, but it's not. It's another tree. In fact, it's this tree here. That's the shadow for it. And this tree back there, you can't see the foliage that's on top of it. And this shadow area is also the original part of the fort that was built by the Confederate Army or the Confederate nation. And so standing there, looking out, looking past, I thought a little bit about a number of American poets, American dreamers. And the thought of it, of what it must have been like, was not the kind of breathtaking, elaborate wonderfulness, but a kind of closing in, which is the way the picture's composed. It's a closing in, and it's also looking out. And it's, depending on how you look at the composition, it's either in thirds or it's in quadrants of 4. And so the geometry gets to be very important. Now, this next picture, that's a picture of me, and this is a picture of me. It's a picture of me taken by a very good friend of mine, Don Camp. And Don has been memorializing, or he's been interpreting black thinkers. I forgot what he called me, but it's something that I'm the photographer or maybe the professor or something like that. But I thought it was an interesting picture because I'm really, there's something happening with my eyes. One is small, the other one is large, and the mouth is slightly crooked. And I looked at that. When I saw the picture on the wall, I didn't recognize myself. And part of the fact that I didn't recognize myself is because I don't normally see me. You know, I mean, most of us don't see us or see what we look like. We're reflections of others. And that in a way is, yes, speak up.
Or use the, you can go closer to the mic. It's
All right,
yeah.
here.
Thank you.
Well, let me telescope it out maybe, or telescope it up.
That's better.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. I just dropped the other one. I have this secret microphone that they're recording me that I just dropped. Oh, it's not the secret microphone. It's a prompter. Okay, me. It really is. That was me. And so that idea of the mirror of what...
Talk into that.
All right, the idea of the mirror, what we look like, who we are, for the most part, it's a mystery. We think we know who we are, but do we really? And part of my journey is that. And one of the things that I've discovered in my work, it's always great to have primary artifacts. And this is a map, a 17th century, 18th century map. It's made in 1730. And what it shows is the Middle Africa. And it happens that these are the principal slave trading areas. And it's a highly detailed map, and it's one of the first things that you encounter when you come into the exhibition. And it's so detailed, you can look and you can see the forts. It tells you exactly the different tribal peoples, where they're located, their names, their vernacular names. It's all there. And this would be a very important document if you're deciding to invest in the slave trade. It's also a very important document if you want to see where that is. And the date of it tells you something about the slave trade, how long ago it was, and really how sophisticated it was from that map. Now, this is a newspaper. It's a very interesting newspaper because it's a New England newspaper, and it's from 1796. The very front, if you go, again, it's right in the front of the gallery as you come in. If you were to look at it, the very front page, there's a reward for runaway Negro man. So if slavery were so wonderful, why would people be running away? And why would the property be so valuable as to be in a newspaper? Front page. And this is a New England newspaper. So slavery was all around us. It was pervasive. And the result of it was that people didn't want to be slaves. And I'm going backwards, so let me go forward. So there. And for me, this is where I started learning about African American people and their history in the Civil War. I photographed this as part of the Battle of Gettysburg in 1986. And then 10 years later, I learned that this was a station on the Underground Railroad. And it's also the high water point of the Confederate States Army in their push north. This is as far north as the Confederate Army ever got, right at that stone wall. And it's interesting that as far as the Confederate Army got, that was also one of the stations on the Underground Railroad. And it's not too far from where Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, which is how I got interested in photographing Civil War landscapes. I photographed Gettysburg for about 10 years and learned a lot. And one of the questions that came up for me was, why weren't there isn't any presence of African Americans or a black story at Gettysburg? And as it turned out, there are quite a few stories of that nature, but they weren't told at that time. They certainly weren't interpreted by the National Park Service. And so it took about 10 years to understand some of the ramifications of Gettysburg. And one of the reasons that we don't understand a lot of our history is because it's there, but it's hidden in plain sight. This is a postcard that I got, and you see it says that it's one of the best places for Negroes to stay. And right next to it is Solomon Northrup's memoir, his biography of his capture and his enslavement. That is the first edition of the book. I should say first printing of it. Maybe it's not the first printing, I take it back. The first edition. The first edition went through about 20,000 copies. Today, that's still an amazing number for a first-time author to sell 20,000 copies in the first edition. This is one of 3 copies of this book that I have. It's maybe, you only need 1 or maybe you need none, because you can certainly get it as a modern edition, but I somehow was drawn to having 3 copies. And this is the front of that postcard, and that's the front of that book. And this is an installation shot at Haverford College of the exhibition of Stirring Song. That's where it was originally, where it originated, and it originated with a partnership with Lehigh University. So both colleges shared the cost or the original organizing of the exhibition. But in the galleries, you can see that there are books, there are photographs, there are maps, and they all go together, because this is part of my way that I found the places to photograph. This is a very interesting book. It's one of the classic books on the history of the Underground Railroad. It was written by William Still, who's an African-American man who's very prosperous. And as it turned out, his brother was separated, or he was separated from his brother, William Still was. And later, he was reunited with his brother. His brother was still a slave. And at the end of the war, he was not a slave, and they were reunited. And William Still wrote this book after the Civil War. It's published in 1872, History of Record of the Underground Railroad. It's still one of the best primary sources if you're doing any work on the Underground Railroad. And again, there's a copy of the book here. I have a couple more copies of this. Again, there's no logical reason why you would want to have more than 1 copy. But the thing about that book is, if you notice, it has a very strong graphic content, the UGRR. In fact, the way it's initialed, the way it's spelled out there, that later became the logo that became how we know the Underground Railroad today. So the book is a graphic, as an object itself, is very significant. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure how Emily's displayed it, but if I had the other copy here with me, we could just have the back of it and you could see it that way. And maybe I'm answering my question about why to have multiples of things, is that if you want to display them, you can display them in different ways, because there are physical objects. You can only see them in one way unless you computerize them and then do an animation. I think it's probably more satisfying to see the object and to see it from a different position than to simply see an animation. Because one of the things about this history that the photographs are looking at or looking into is that it existed. And so the physicality of the objects is very important. And this is the site of the Underground Railroad activity. This is the Christiana Rebellion. And this is the first time that Africans, armed Africans, fought back the slave masters and slave catchers. Right at that spot right there. I think it's interesting that in the scene, the modern scene, the tree has got a chain around it. And again, as you can see, the geometry of the picture, it's either divides itself into fourths in this instance, or it divides itself into eighths. That's the geometry of it. So I like to think that the photographs really are, they're abstractions, but they're abstractions with physicality. Because where you stand when you make the photograph, the lens that you use, and the light, and also the place is invested with a purpose. And so as an artist, you want to, or at least I want to, give it meaning, because you could easily go by this, which many people do. And I went to this place recently and it's totally changed. They moved everything. They put everything the way it was supposed to be. And I don't know, I just couldn't make a picture of that. So I'm glad I made this one. This is I just watched Glory with Denzel, who won the Academy Award. And this is that little lighthouse there. That's the fort that they were trying to capture. That's all that remains of it today. And probably that's a fitting symbol, because it's easy to want to forget. And that's what happened with again, the Army Corps of Engineers decided to channel the river, and the river washed out the fort where this battle had happened. I mean, if that fort were there today, everybody would probably want to go see it. But all it remains is that lighthouse, which is going to fall over soon. This is an image. Originally, when I bought this, it was advertised as Confederate money. It turns out it's not Confederate money. It's Alabama state bank currency, which most banking before it became the Federal Reserve and all of that. I believe it's 1905 was the restructuring of American currency, so it was uniform. Banks would issue their own money. And I think it's so instructive here. There's George Washington, and then there's the landscape of the slave master, and then the slaves picking cotton. Now, the last picture I showed you was many of the men that were in the 54th, and that's why I brought up Denzel, because Denzel was a slave and he ran away, and then he wanted to return to fight for his freedom. And so, again, if slavery was such a wonderful thing, why would people run away, and why would they go back and fight their masters? So the facts and the circumstances of the reality are quite different than something like Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell's famous book, even better movie. Some of it is so far off that it is totally not fiction, but it becomes a historical lie. And this is one of the problems that we have navigating through history, is what's true and what's not. Now, one of the things that's very true in the United States is religion. People have very strong faith communities. And that was no different in the 17th, 18th, 19th century as it is today. And so these two pictures here represent two memorials to African American congregations who were active participants in the Underground Railroad and actively fulminating against the legal institution of slavery. The first one, this one here, is in Delaware. And there's an interesting story I can tell you. I could tell you stories about all of these pictures. But this one is really interesting for me because it's typical. I spent an hour looking for this. I kept going around and around and around it because I thought it was something really big. It said park, so I thought it would be as big as this library gallery. And it was just a little thing. But then I finally, after an hour of going around, I finally got out and I started walking. And then I found this quiet little spot where it's the footprint of the church and it's also the burial ground of the bishop whose statue is there. And this picture over here is Harriet Tubman worshipped at this church. And so did Frederick Douglass. And it's an A.M.E. church. And it's, again, I don't show you the building at all. I show you details from it. I found that it was better to work with a detail than to work with a big scene or to try and make it like an Ansel Adams landscape. Working small, working intimate, also represents the story, or the at least as I understood it, what I was trying to make a photograph of. And over here, another part that we all are very, very appreciative of and are interested in is education. This particular interior is all that's left of the Oneida Institute, which is located in Whitesboro, New York. And it's where many of the abolitionist preachers, black and white, were trained. And the only way that I actually found this was through this circular window, because those buildings, the campus over the years, they sold the campus, et cetera, and it was changed into a mill. And so the only architectural element that I could locate from the 19th century etchings of the campus was the main building's window. And it was very interesting. I talked to the man who owned this, and he just gave me free rein of being in the building. And so I spent about a day. I was there in the morning and I left around 5 o'clock. And looking for different motifs to echo what I thought was a very important place. And that's the picture that resulted. Now again, this is very interesting, another set of classrooms, abandoned classrooms. These classrooms were in Alabama. And they were on the site of a Civil War fort, and that fort later became a freedmen's school, and that school later became, or it migrated into, and it became the black school for Athens, Alabama. So that's where this battle took place. And eventually when the schools were desegregated, the school that had operated for over a century, it simply stopped. I mean, you can see the blackboard, everything is prepared for the next set of students, and they just never came. And then eventually the kids start playing in some of the classrooms, and so that's what happened. But but just looking at those without me telling you what they were, you'd say, well, they're just nice pictures of classrooms. Like this picture here, which is, oops, going the wrong way, sorry. Like this picture here, this is a slave cabin on a farm in Maryland. And the people that own this property had recently spent $150,000 to restore this building. And it was restored to its, or I should say it was restored to a standard that preserved the integrity of the structure. And so I was allowed to be in the building. I, again, was there for half a day. And this is one of the pictures that resulted. Now, I found the structure really interesting because it was a two-story structure. And so there probably were a number of families that lived in this building. And again, I looked at situated my camera and looked, and this is what I came up with as an interior. I used to not photograph interiors, but I got very interested in them because the silence, the light, the space, the air, all of that started to intrigue me, and I wanted to see if I could make a picture of it. So that's how these started. This is another Civil War battlefield. And the actual battlefield is really up here. And there's more because this is the levee on the other side of the Mississippi River. But I was brought to this spot by a man who'd lived his whole life here and who knew the stories of the battle. This is a place that also had a GAR post. This is in Louisiana, and they had a GAR post. And the reason they had a GAR post is because this is where the soldiers, the black soldiers fought, and they were Union veterans, and they had their GAR post in Louisiana. This place later, I found out, was very infamous for a Ku Klux Klan lynching that happened there. It's right across from Natchez, Mississippi. And again, you just wouldn't know that that there was a battlefield there, that anything of consequence. Which is, I think, the apt metaphor for thinking of these places that people sacrifice their lives for to make free all of us. And the making free, what does that really entail? What does it really mean? And this picture here, that's Gettysburg. And I photographed that cornfield one time I was up there in the fall. Or is it the spring? No, it's the spring. I was there in the spring because it would be about this time. Spring break is when I would go to Gettysburg. And I was just, I don't know, walking through that field, and it just struck me I should point the camera down and take the picture. And it's a picture that's resonated with me over a long, long time. Like this picture here has also resonated with me. This is Athens, Alabama. This is this spot. This place is not too long after the massacre at Fort Pillow, which is one of the most infamous Civil War battles or massacres, however you'd like to name it, that occurred. And this is General Forrest. And he tricked the Union into thinking that, again, he had more troops than he actually had. He had the white officers surrender their black troops. And then, fortunately, everybody kept their lives, or their lives were spared. Whereas here in Fort Pillow, that didn't happen. And where I'm situated, the camera is where some of the massacred troops, that's where that occurred. Now, I'm going to show you this next set of works, which take us back to and tell us what people thought of Fort Pillow at the time that it occurred. The first is an official record, congressional record of Fort Pillow and the activities there. And the second one is a print. And the print is very gory. You can see the women are being stabbed, and so are the children, as well as the soldiers, and the Confederate battle flag is coming in. And at first I thought, no, that's not, this is just, you know, Union propaganda. That's not what happened. If you read the official account, that is what happened. And, you know, just go back to that, go to that, and then we'll go one more, and we'll go here. This is, again, in glory, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. The 54th they were one of the most decorated of any regiment in the Union Army. And this is their landing spot for a series of battles that would parallel Sherman's March to the Sea, which is much more famous. But it was the same set of ideas that they would raid and they would take apart the railroad. And that's their landing spot. And it was really amazing to find this place because I drove my car on the exact road that these troops would have marched on. It was still there. But I saw these signs that said for sale, private property, and I don't know what it's like today, but at that time you could get right to the river on the original road. And I don't know if you follow the Arlington Cemetery news, but this is a section of the cemetery where it actually was the freedmen's area at Arlington Estate, or the plantation. This is where the slaves stayed that were free. They became freedmen, and many died there, and they're buried. And so at this section of Arlington, there are civilians, there are soldiers, and it's a special section. As you can see, it's also on a hill, and there are trees, and it's also a watershed area. So it's an environmentally sensitive area as well as a historically significant one. And I was very moved when I was in Arlington, moving around, walking through the cemetery. I came to this spot, section 19. And this is what I was able to make of that site. And this next picture will show you that set of panels is way down in the end, and the cards that show the freed slaves, New Orleans, is over there. And the two different views, or two different sides of slavery. And this is the back of that card, and those cards are used for propaganda purposes, just as the first one. But in this case, it was to raise money to treat or educate the newly freed slaves. It's pretty interesting. Again, the photography is very significant. Oops, sorry. And so is the graphic work. Here's a battle showing these soldiers fighting. Harper's Magazine this appeared in. Now, why would I then show you this next one? This is Winslow Homer. The first one's Thomas Nast. This is Winslow Homer. This is his Central Park skating pond. where this is one of the historic black neighborhoods in New York City. It was cleared out to make way for Central Park. Here are the generals. There's General Howard in the front. He's the one-armed general that Howard University was named after. Here's a card that shows the term contraband. It's a legal term. Benjamin Butler, who's a Civil War general, also a very fine lawyer, came up with that term so that the slaves who had run to the Union lines at the beginning of the war, they were returned and put back into bondage. And Butler came up with this term, said, no, if we do that, we're just helping the enemy. And so here's a cartoon that's on a letter envelope that was circulated. This one was uncirculated. It's a very powerful piece of graphic art. And I think I'm running to the end of my time here because there should be a time for you to have questions. I'm sure that as I've talked, a number of questions have come up for you, and I'm going to show you this last picture. Oops, I don't know why it's counterintuitive. This is the last picture. Again, this is a battle site in Louisiana, again, this happened to be on a plantation. The only way you can get to this spot is that you have to go about a quarter of a mile in on the plantation road. Then you get to the levee, you go over the levee, and then you're in the bottomland, and then you walk through the bottomland and you get to this spot. This is where this battle occurred. And it's just a beautiful place. I mean, you just never know that people were killed and massacred there. But they were. And it was my responsibility to make a picture of it, not only for myself, but for my audience to reflect on the complexity and how easy it is to separate ourselves from something that defines us and continues to define us, and that we are hopefully trying to get to that place of freedom. So I'll end here. I believe that we now can have questions, and it actually is the end of my presentation. So thank you all.
So Professor Williams will take your questions. And by the way, he has some copies of the catalog that are available for sale. If you'd like to examine a copy, it's on the table by the door. Questions? I have one for you.
Well, there's one back there.
One here.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about your feelings that you had when you were at some of these places? I know they're very powerful in terms of what they meant for the nation. Was there like a haunted feeling? Were you inspired by what these people had accomplished? What were those feelings?
All of that.
All of it?
Yeah. One thing I did learn is that you should never have a negative feeling when you're in any of these places. I was at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, and I was thinking, boy, these assholes. I use a better term than that, but I was thinking really negative thoughts about the Confederate war dead, and I was thinking, really, really bad things, because I wasn't really, that really wasn't what I should have been thinking, reflecting on what the war was about or any of that. And it just, at that moment that all these bad thoughts were going through my mind, there was a voice that told me to step back. And so I stepped back. It was a perfectly sunny, beautiful day. And I stepped back, and just as I did, a big branch from an oak tree, the branch was as big as this cross, as this podium. And just where I'd standing, that's where that branch fell. And it wiped out about 10 or 15 gravestones. And if I'd just been standing there, I would have been killed. So that was very sobering. And another time, I was at the, I'm forgetting the name of these troops, but I was with these, and this is a little different. I was in this graveyard where where Butler's troops had been, where they were buried. They were buried as a unit, and I was in that cemetery, and I was just looking at the graves, and then suddenly, those stones started to move, and I sat down, which you should never do in the summer in Virginia in the grass. And I did. And what happened was that I was attacked by these ants, and so I got all these bites. I mean, it was really bad bites. And what I learned from that probably, again, is that you should, if you're in a place like that, you should always have water, and you should never sit down, because all the graves are they're at attention. So if you sit down and you're not paying respect, then you may get bitten by ants. And so being in these places, it is very haunting, particularly if if you're driving 2,000 miles to get to someplace and you finally get there and you can't find it for an hour. And then you find it is something. Or someone shows you a place that's been lost and they're the expert, and then they tell you where it is. They share with you something that not too many people would be interested in. So that's really very important. And I might say that, I hope you've understood this, that a lot of these pictures are made on private property, so they're not accessible. And a lot of the places, even if they're on public land, they're not marked. And so it's, you really need to have someone who's an expert in that area show you and then share with you. And then when they do that, they are expecting that you're going to do or use what they've spent a long time conserving to a good purpose. So that's, those are some of the things that go into making these pictures, because it is very collaborative.
Question over here.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, I wonder if you could just sketch for us a little bit about the scope of the project, because you started with Jamestown,
Right.
But most of the images you showed us today really focus on Civil War sites, so I'm curious of whether you are thinking about the Civil War as the organizing principle, or if there is a sort of more sense that you're documenting the history of slavery more generally. And then the second question, and then I'll let you answer, is I'm really intrigued by this idea of photographing lost, obscure, inaccessible, hidden sites. And I wonder how you think about the possibility or the importance of
Right.
taking a photograph of something that's obscure.
Right. Well, first, I was told I had 40 minutes
Okay.
to talk. But the exhibition itself it takes you into the Caribbean, takes you into New England, it takes you as far south as Brownsville, Texas. That's as far as you can go. So it covers a wide geographic area in an area outside of the United States. And the overarching theme is slavery, because that's what the Civil War culminated in. And then after that, the Civil War amendments came out of that. So slavery really is very important. And there's also a section in the show that that continues after the cessation of the war, and that is the continued activity of the black soldiers in the West, and with that, the untold story of black exploration of the West. So it is a large story, but I was given a specific amount of time, so I thought I would talk about an area or show you things that are germane to what we're talking about, and which really is the linchpin of the show is the Civil War, but it's all of these other things too. Just hoping again that the true complexity of the story of America. And the one part that I didn't stress that I should stress that you asked the question is that it really is a cooperative sense of history, that there are always black and white people, people of color. When I say people of color, that's red people, brown people, yellow people, all work together to define what freedom is. So in a way, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, or it could be a series of talks about how you put all these things together. But that's really also a very important part of it, is that people work together and things happen. But because they work together, that doesn't mean that people's hearts change or society changes overnight. That's a much larger and much harder process. Now, the other part that you were asking about, which was the last part?
The photographing something that's
right. The obscurity part. It's not really obscure. It's simply that the memories that should be attached to it are detached. And it's about reconnecting consciousness to these places. And most of the time we look at the places, they seem very ordinary, and they're not. And so part of it is about appreciating, or maybe being more critical of where we are, where we're situated. So it's about awareness. And really, Charles Baudelaire, when I was coming down here, I had all these big thoughts I was going to tell an audience. I was going to like lay down some stuff, you know. But I just decided I could go that way. But the real power of art is when it's situated in a lived space or lived things. And so that's part of it, is the project is about reconnecting. So it's situated there, and it's also situated in conceptual art, participatory. So that's why and again, Emily's done such a brilliant job of situating the photographs of how things look today with the historic objects of how they were reported on and how people portrayed them then. There's a huge difference in the topicality of Lieutenant Caillou, who was the Louisiana native first guardsman who was killed at Port Hudson, but his body was not allowed to be collected until after the battle because he was a person of color. Now, his story's on the front, his funeral is on the front cover of Harper's Magazine, and it's drawn by a member of the troupe. So that representation is the first time the black artist works presented in Harper's Magazine. So that's an important thing, but who knows that? Who cares? Well, we all should care to some extent about Lieutenant Caillou, and you can see the place where he was killed. It's just a little dusty spot, but it's more than just a little dusty spot. And maybe that gets back to what Tom's introduction, which was, again, I'm still thinking about it, is about poetry. And it's about condensing lots of seemingly unrelated things into one piece that can be looked at or digested. But in digesting it, it's like a good piece of Swiss chocolate. It takes a long time. You shouldn't eat many at once. You should slowly take it down, preferably with some coffee or another beverage, and then it gets even better. But you can't just gobble it all down or you'll get sick. So I want to make it so that the possibility of coming back is a reward, that you'll see things.
Question over here, somebody had? Here.
When you're selecting these places, which are, like even though this is a natural landscape, it's all about associated with a story, does that come from like historical research, or does that come from like word of mouth conversations with people, or how do you select these sites?
How do I select them? Well, some things just like Fort Pillow. I wanted to go to Fort Pillow. That's like famous. And it's famous because it's near where Alex Haley grew up. Fort Pillow is 5 miles from where Alex Haley got the stories from his grandparents about where the family originated. And so when you go to see his house or see his boyhood home and then go out to Fort Pillow, it's pretty powerful. So actually, I mean, I think there may be a picture of, maybe there's not, but I photographed Alex Haley's boyhood house, and also another part of the Haley family, where they come from in Alabama. The plantation house there, Chicken George, all of that I've worked on, I've photographed. It's not here in this particular iteration of the work, but all of those places, like once you start reading about these places, you want to go. In fact, I met a relative of Alex Haley's by marriage who introduced me to the present-day Queen, the memoir that he wrote about his relatives. So I met this lady. I met her at the Haley family graves, and it was very interesting. I mean, I shouldn't say it was interesting. It was more than interesting. It was like reaching back into history, and then eventually I met a student at Haverford whose family owned the plantation where the Haley's family was enslaved. So it's a very set of circumstances that all blended together. And so I went to those places. I've been very fortunate that the job that I have, I get paid to do that. So it's been an adventure. Yes.
Yeah, it's really impressive how you add historical context to these places that, as you said, no one really cares about in the modern day. And I noticed something that really strikes me is that you do all of your work in black and white. I was just wondering, is there a reason that you never take color photographs?
I do take color photographs. I do. But I find that the place that is most powerful for me is in black and white. I mean, I've been thinking about color. I photographed color in Gettysburg. In fact, some of that work is on display right now. And I'm thinking if I were to go anywhere near digital in a serious way, it would be in color. Simply because the whole parameters of how you make a picture change. There's so much more that you can do with digital that you can't do with black and white film or color film or film at all, because it's a whole different, it's really a whole different medium. And so I've been thinking about how would you use digital and make photographs or make a multimedia set of sensations that would take advantage of the technology. So yeah, but I just find the black and white is really powerful because it's really not black and white, it's all the shades of the color spectrum that are translated into black and white. So I like that remove, like you're there and then you have to abstract it. And if you're working with a view camera, the scene's always upside down and reversed anyway. So you're really looking at balances and shifts, and also drawing, because you can literally change perspective and what you want to emphasize or de-emphasize. And you can certainly do that with lenses. And you could do that on a digital camera too, but I find the exercise, I've worked on this so long that it's something hard to give up, really. But you have to stay in touch with all the technologies. But I choose to do this black and white, and also the pictures are small. You comment on the smallness when everything today is big. I'm going small. And the reason for that is I'd like you to get close to the work. I'd like you to step into it or get physical with it in that way. And at the same time, there are some very large carbon prints. And that's the carbon is that that simply means they're archival, but they're ink prints. And they are from digital files scanned from negatives. So that's, and that's the point of that, is to actually change the scale and the pace, and also let you see details that you might not be aware of, or relationships that are not so aware when they're small. So some of the pictures are fairly large.
Okay. I'm sure Professor Williams will be available. We have a reception for everyone to enjoy. We can talk over many of these topics over the reception. Please give another hand to Professor Williams.
And let me give you a hand. Thank you.